get ready to dim the lights and lock your doors. Friday Night Frights is here to haunt your weekend. Every Friday night, we bring you spine-chilling tales of the macabre, the mysterious, and the downright terrifying. From cursed artifacts to shadowy creatures lurking in the dark, these stories will keep you on the edge of your seat long after the episode ends. Are you brave enough to listen? Tune in and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more eerie episodes. Our story tonight is called The Purse Snatcher by Dean R. Koontz. So grab a cup of something yummy, sit back and relax, and enjoy the story. Billy Neeks had a flexible philosophy regarding property rights. He believed in the proletarian ideal of shared wealth, as long as the wealth belonged to someone else. On the other hand, if the property belonged to him, Billy was prepared to defend it to the death. This was a simple, workable philosophy for a thief, which Billy was. Billy Neeks' occupation was reflected in his grooming. He looked slippery. His thick black hair was slicked back with enough scented oil to fill a crankcase. His coarse skin was perpetually mottled, as if he suffered continuously from malaria. He moved cat-quick on well-lubricated joints, and his hands had the buttery grace of a magician's hands. His eyes resembled twin pools of Texas crude oil, wet and black and deep, and utterly untouched by any human warmth or feeling. If the route to hell were an inclined ramp requiring a hideous grease to facilitate descent, Billy Neeks would be the devil's choice to pass eternity in the application of that noxious substance. In action, Billy could bump into an unsuspecting woman, separate her from her purse, and be 10 yards away and moving fast by the time she realized that she'd been victimized. Single-strap purses, double-strap purses, clutch purses, purses carried over the shoulder, purses carried in the hand, all meant easy money to Billy Neeks. Whether his target was cautious or careless was of no consequence. Virtually no precautions could foil him. That Wednesday in April, pretending to be drunk, he jostled a well-dressed elderly woman on Broad Street, just past Bartram's department store. As she recoiled in disgust from that oily contact, Billy slipped her purse off her shoulder, down her arm, and into the plastic shopping bag that he carried. He reeled away from her and took 6 or 8 steps in an exaggerated stagger before she realized that the collision had not been as accidental as it seemed. Even as the victim shrieked, "Police!" Billy had begun to run, and by the time she added, "Help! Police! Help!" Billy was nearly out of earshot. He raced through a series of alleyways, dodging around garbage cans and dumpsters, and leaped across the splayed legs of a sleeping wino. He sprinted across a parking lot and fled into another alley. Blocks from Bartram's, Billy slowed to a walk. He was breathing only slightly harder than usual, grinning. Stepping out of the alley onto 46th Street, he spotted a young mother carrying a baby, a shopping bag, and a purse. She looked so defenseless that Billy couldn't resist the opportunity, so he flicked open his switchblade and, in a wink, cut the thin straps on her bag, a stylish blue leather number. Then he dashed off again, across the street, where drivers braked sharply and blew their horns at him, into another network of alleyways, all familiar to him. As he ran, he giggled. His giggle was neither shrill nor engaging, but more like the sound of ointment squirting from a tube. When he slid on spilled garbage, orange peels, rotting lettuce, mounds of molding and soggy bread, he was not tripped up or even slowed down. The disgusting muck seemed to facilitate his flight, and he came out of the slide moving faster than he had gone into it. He slowed to a normal pace when he reached Prospect Boulevard. The switchblade was in his pocket again. Both stolen purses were concealed in the plastic shopping bag. He projected what he believed to be an air of nonchalance, and although his calculated expression of innocence was actually a dismal failure, it was the best that he could do. He strolled to his car, which he had parked at a meter along Prospect. The Pontiac, unwashed for at least 2 years, left oil drippings wherever it went, just as a wolf in the wilds marked its territory with dribbles of urine. Billy put the stolen purses in the trunk of the car and, whistling happily, drove away from that part of the city toward yet untouched prowling grounds in other neighborhoods. Of the several reasons for his success as a purse snatcher, mobility was perhaps the most important. Many snatchers were kids seeking a few fast bucks, young hoods without wheels. Billy Neeks was 25, not a kid, and possessed reliable transportation. He usually robbed 2 or 3 women in one neighborhood and then quickly moved on to another territory where no one was looking for him and where more business waited to be done. To him, this was not small-time thievery committed either by impulse or out of desperation. Instead, Billy saw it as a business, and he was a businessman, and like other businessmen, he planned his work carefully, weighed the risks and benefits of any opportunity, and acted only as a result of careful, responsible analysis. Other snatchers, amateurs and punks, every one of them, paused on the street or in an alley to hastily search purses for valuables, risking arrest because of their inadvisable delays, at the very least creating a host of additional witnesses to their crimes. Billy, on the other hand, stashed the stolen purses in the trunk of his car to be retrieved later for more leisurely inspection in the privacy of his home. He prided himself on his methodicalness and caution. That cloudy and humid Wednesday in late April, he crossed and recrossed the city, visiting 3 widely separated districts and snatching 6 purses, in addition to those that he had taken from the elderly woman outside Bartram's and from the young mother on 46th Street. The last of the 8 also came from an old woman. At first he thought that it was going to be an easy hit, and then he thought that it was going to get messy, and finally it just turned out to be weird. When Billy spotted her, she was coming out of a butcher's shop on West End Avenue, clutching a package of meat to her breast. She was old. Her brittle white hair stirred in the spring breeze, and Billy had the curious notion that he could hear those dry locks rustling against one another. Her crumpled parchment face, her slumped shoulders, her pale, withered hands, and her shuffling step combined to convey the impression not only of extreme age, but of frailty and vulnerability, which drew Billy Neeks as if he were an iron filing, and she a magnet. Her purse was big, almost a satchel, and the weight of it, in addition to the package of meat, seemed to bother her because she was shrugging the straps farther up on her shoulder and wincing in pain, as if suffering from a flare-up of arthritis. Although it was spring, she was dressed in black. Black shoes, black stockings, black skirt, dark gray blouse, even a heavy black cardigan sweater unsuited to the mild day. Billy looked up and down the street, saw no one else nearby, and quickly made his move. He did his drunk trick, staggering, jostling the old biddy. But as he pulled the purse down her arm, she dropped the package of meat, seized the bag with both hands, and for a moment they were locked in an unexpectedly fierce struggle. Ancient as she was, she possessed surprising strength. He tugged at her purse, wrenched and twisted it, desperately attempted to rock her backward off her feet, but she stood her ground and held on with the tenacity of a deeply rooted tree resisting a storm wind. He said, "Give it up, you stupid old witch, or I'll bust your face." And then a strange thing happened. She changed before Billy's eyes. She no longer appeared frail, but steely, no longer weak, but darkly energized. Her bony, arthritic hands suddenly looked like the dangerous talons of a powerful bird of prey. That singular face, pale yet jaundiced, nearly fleshless, all wrinkles and sharp pointing lines, was still ancient, but it no longer seemed quite human to Billy Neeks. And her eyes, oh my God, her eyes! At first glance, Billy saw only the watery, myopic gaze of a doddering crone, but abruptly they were the eyes of tremendous power, eyes of fire and ice, simultaneously boiling his blood and freezing his heart, eyes that saw into him and through him, not the eyes of a helpless old granny, but those of a murderous beast that had the desire and ability to devour him alive. He gasped in fear, and he almost let go of the purse, almost ran. In a blink, however, she was transformed into a defenseless old woman again. Abruptly, she capitulated. Like pop beads, the swollen knuckles of her twisted hands seemed to come apart, and her finger joints went slack. She lost her grip, releasing the purse with a small cry of despair. Emitting a menacing snarl that served not only to frighten the old woman, but also to chase away Billy's own irrational terror, he shoved her backward into a curbside trash container, and he bolted past her, with the satchel-sized purse under his arm. He glanced back after several steps, half expecting to see that she had fully assumed the form of a great dark bird of prey, flying at him, eyes aflame, teeth bared, talon hands spread and hooked to tear him to bits. But she was clutching at the trash container to keep her balance, as age-broken and helpless as she had been when he had first seen her. The only odd thing, she was looking after him with a smile. No mistaking it, a wide, stained-tooth smile, almost a lunatic grin. Senile old fool, Billy thought. Has to be senile if she finds anything funny about having her purse snatched. He could not imagine why he had ever been afraid of her. He ran, dodging from one alleyway to another, down side streets, across a sun-splashed parking lot, along a shadowy service passage between two tenements, and onto a street far removed from the scene of the latest theft. At a stroll, he returned to his parked car and put the old woman's black purse in the trunk, with the others taken elsewhere in the city. At last, a hard day's work behind him, he drove home, looking forward to counting his take, having a few icy beers, and watching some TV. Once, stopped at a red traffic light, Billy thought he heard something moving in the car trunk, a few hollow thumps, a brief but curious scraping. When he cocked his head and listened closer, however, he heard nothing more, and he decided that the noise had only been the pile of stolen purses shifting under their own weight. Billy Neeks lived in a ramshackle 4-room bungalow between a vacant lot and a transmission shop 2 blocks from the river. The place had belonged to his mother, and it had been clean and in good repair when she had lived there. 2 years ago, Billy had convinced her to transfer ownership to him for tax reasons, then had shipped her off to a nursing home to be tended at the expense of the state. He supposed she was still there. He didn't know for sure because he had never visited. That evening in April, Billy arranged the 8 purses side by side in 2 rows on the kitchen table and stared at them for a while in sweet anticipation of the treasure hunt to come. He popped the tab of a Budweiser. He tore open a bag of Doritos. He pulled up a chair, sat down, and sighed contentedly. Finally, he opened the purse that he had taken off the woman outside Bartram's and began to calculate his earnings. She had looked well-to-do, and the contents of her wallet did not disappoint Billy Neeks. $409 in folding money, plus another $3.10 in change. She also carried a stack of credit cards, which Billy would be able to fence through Jake Barcelli, the pawn-shop owner, who would also give him a few bucks for whatever other worthwhile loot he found in the purses. In the first bag, those miscellaneous, fensible items included a gold-plated Tiffany pen, a matching gold-plated Tiffany compact, and a lipstick tube, and a fine, though not extraordinarily expensive, opal ring. The young mother's purse contained only $11.42, nothing else of value. Billy had expected as much, but this meager profit did not diminish the thrill he got from going through the contents of the bag. He regarded snatching as a business, yes, and thought of himself as a good businessman, but he also took considerable pleasure simply from examining and touching his victim's possessions. The violation of a woman's personal property was a violation of her, too, and when his quick hands explored the young mother's purse, it was almost as if he were exploring her body. Sometimes Billy took unfencible items, cheap compacts, inexpensive tubes of lipstick, eyeglasses, and put them on the floor and stomped them, because crushing them beneath his heel was curiously almost like crushing the woman herself. Easy money made his work worthwhile, but he was equally motivated by the tremendous sense of power that he got from the job. It stimulated him. It really did. Stimulated and satisfied. By the time he'd gone slowly through 7 of the 8 purses, savoring their contents, it was 7:15 in the evening, and Billy was euphoric. He breathed fast and occasionally shuddered ecstatically. His oily hair looked oilier than usual, for it was damp with sweat and hung in clumps and tangles. Perspiration glimmered on his face. During his exploration of the purses, he knocked the open Doritos off the kitchen table, but didn't notice. He opened a second beer, but he never took a taste of it. Now it stood warm and forgotten. His world had shrunk to the dimensions of a woman's purse. Billy had saved the crazy old woman's bag for last because he had a hunch that it was going to provide the greatest treasure of the day. The hag's purse was big, almost a satchel, made of supple black leather, with long straps and with a single main compartment that was zippered shut. He pulled it in front of him and stared at it for a while, letting sweet anticipation build. He remembered how the crone had resisted him, holding fast to the bag until he thought that he might have to flick open his switchblade and cut her. He had cut a few women before, not many, but enough to know that he liked cutting them. That was the problem. Billy was smart enough to realize that, liking knife play so much, he must deny himself the pure pleasure of cutting people, resorting to violence only when absolutely necessary. If he used the knife too often, he would be unable to stop using it, would be compelled to use it, and then he would be lost. Although the police expended no energy in the search for mere purse snatchers, they would be a lot more aggressive and relentless in the pursuit of a slasher. Still, he He had not cut anyone for several months, and by such admirable self-control he should have earned the right to have some fun. He would have taken enormous pleasure in separating the old woman's withered meat from her bones. Now he wondered why he had not ripped her up the moment she had given him trouble. He had virtually forgotten how she'd briefly terrified him, how she had looked less human than avian, how her bony hands had seemed to change into wicked talons, and how her eyes had blazed. Deeply confirmed in his macho self-image, he had no capacity for any memory that had the potential for humiliation. With a growing certainty that he was about to find a surprising treasure, he put his hands on the purse and lightly squeezed. It was crammed full, straining at the seams, the mother of all purses, and Billy told himself that the forms he felt through the leather were wads of money, banded stacks of $100 bills. His heart thumped with excitement. He pulled open the zipper, looked in, and frowned. The inside of the purse was dark. Billy peered closer. Very dark. Impossibly dark. Squinting, he could see nothing in there at all. Not a wallet or a compact or a comb or a packet of Kleenex, not even the lining of the purse itself, only a flawless and deep darkness, as if he were peering into a well. Deep was the word, all right, for he had a sense that he was staring down into unplumbable and mysterious depths, as if the bottom of the purse were not just a few inches away, but thousands of feet down, even farther, countless miles below him. Suddenly he realized that the glow from the overhead fluorescents fell into the open purse, but illuminated nothing. The bag seemed to swallow every ray of light and digest it. Billy Neek's warm sweat of quasi-erotic pleasure turned icy, and his skin dimpled with goose flesh. He knew that he should pull the zipper shut, cautiously carry the purse blocks away from his own house, and dispose of it in someone else's trash bin. But he saw his right hand slipping toward the gaping maw of the bag. When he tried to pull his hand back, he could not, as though it were a stranger's hand over which he had no control. His fingers disappeared into the darkness, and the rest of his hand followed. He shook his head. No, no, but still he could not stop himself. He was compelled to reach into the bag, and now his hand was in all the way to the wrist, and he felt nothing in there, nothing but a terrible cold that made his teeth chatter, and still he reached in and down until his arm was shoved all the way into the elbow. He should have felt the bottom of the purse long before this, but there was just a vast emptiness in it, so he reached down farther until he was in almost to his shoulder, feeling around with splayed fingers, searching in that impossible void for something, anything. That was when something found him. Down deep in the bag, something brushed his hand. Billy jerked in surprise. Something bit him. Billy screamed and finally found the will to resist the siren call of the darkness in the purse. He tore his hand out and leaped to his feet, knocking over his chair. He stared in astonishment at the bloody punctures on the meaty portion of his palm. Tooth marks, 5 small holes, neat and round, welling blood. At first, numb with shock, he at last let out a wail and grabbed for the zipper on the purse to close it. Even as Billy's blood-slick fingers touched the pull tab, the creature climbed out of the bag, ascending from a lightless place, and Billy snatched his hand back in terror. The beast was small, only about a foot tall, not too big to crawl out through the open mouth of the purse. It was gnarly and darkish, like a man in form, 2 arms, 2 legs, but not like a man in any other way at all. If its tissues had not once been inanimate lumps of stinking sewage, then they had been a sludge of mysterious, though equally noxious, origins. Its muscles and sinews appeared to be formed from human waste, all tangled with human hair and decaying human entrails and desiccated human veins. Its feet were twice as large as they should have been, and terminated in razor-edged black claws that put as much fear into Billy Neeks as his own switchblade had put into others. A hooked and pointed spur curved up from the back of each heel. The arms were proportionately as long as those of an ape, with 6 or maybe 7 fingers. Billy could not be sure of how many, because the thing kept working its hands ceaselessly as it crawled out of the purse and stood up on the table, and each finger ended in an ebony claw. As the creature rose to its feet and emitted a fierce hiss, Billy stumbled backward until he came up against the refrigerator. Over the sink was a window, locked and covered with greasy curtains. The door to the dining room was on the other side of the kitchen table. To get to another door that opened onto the back porch, he would have to go past the table as well. He was effectively trapped. The thing's head was asymmetrical, lumpy, pocked, as if crudely modeled by a sculptor with an imperfect sense of human form, crafted from sewage and scraps of rotten tissue, as was its body. A pair of eyes were set high on that portion of the face that would have been the forehead, and a second pair blinked below them. 2 more eyes, making 6 in all, were located at the sides of the skull, where ears should have been, and all these organs of vision were entirely white, without iris or pupil, so the beast appeared to be blinded by cataracts. But it could see. Most definitely it could see, for it was looking straight at Billy. Trembling violently, making strangled sounds of fear, Billy reached to one side with his bitten right hand, and he pulled open a drawer in the cabinet next to the refrigerator. Never taking his eyes off the thing that had come out of the purse, he fumbled for the knives that he knew were there, found them, and extracted the butcher's knife. On the table, the 6-eyed demon opened its ragged mouth, revealing rows of pointed yellow teeth. It hissed again. Twisting its deformed mouth into what might have been a grin, the demon kicked the open can of beer off the table and let out a hideous dry sound, halfway between a snarl and a giggle. Suddenly, lunging forward and swinging the big butcher's knife as if it were a mighty samurai sword, Billy slashed at the creature, intending to lop off its head, chop it in half. The blade connected with its disgusting flesh, sank less than an inch into its darkly glistening torso above its knobby hips, but would not go any deeper, certainly not all the way through. Billy felt as if he had taken a hack at a slab of steel, for the aborted power of the blow coursed back through the handle of the knife and shivered painfully through his hands and arms like the vibrations that would have rebounded upon him if he had grabbed a crowbar and, with all his strength, slammed it into a solid iron post. In that same instant, one of the creature's hands moved flash-quick, slashed Billy, revealing 2 of his knuckle bones. With a cry of surprise and pain, Billy let go of the weapon. He staggered back against the refrigerator, holding his gouged hand. The creature on the table stood unfazed, the knife embedded in its side, neither bleeding nor exhibiting any signs of pain. With its small, black, gnarled hands, the beast gripped the handle and pulled the weapon from its flesh. Turning 6 scintillant, milky eyes on Billy, it raised the knife, which was nearly as big as the beast itself, and snapped it in 2. It threw the blade in one direction and the handle in another. Billy ran. He had to go around the table, past the creature, too close, but he did not care, did not hesitate, because his only alternative was to stand at the refrigerator and be torn to bits. Dashing out of the kitchen into the bungalow's dining room, he heard a thump behind him as the demon leaped off the table. Worse, he heard the click-tick-clack of its chitinous feet and horny claws as it scrambled across the linoleum, hurrying after him. As a purse snatcher, Billy had to keep in shape and had to be able to run as fast as a deer. Now his conditioning was the only advantage he had. Was it possible to outrun the devil? He bounded out of the dining room, jumped over a footstool in the living room, and fled toward the front door. His bungalow was isolated between an empty lot and a transmission repair shop that was closed at this hour of the evening. A few houses stood across the street, however, and at the corner was a 7-Eleven market that was usually busy. He figured that he would be safe if he was with other people, even strangers. He sensed that the demon would not want to be seen by anyone else. Expecting the beast to leap on him and sink its teeth into his neck, Billy tore open the front door and almost plunged out of the house, then stopped abruptly when he saw what lay outside. Nothing. No front walk, no lawn, no trees, no street, no other houses across the way, no 7-Eleven on the corner. Nothing, nothing. No light whatsoever. The night beyond the house was unnaturally dark, as utterly lightless as the bottom of a mine shaft, or as the inside of the old hag's purse, from which the beast had clambered. Although it should have been a warm late April evening, the velvet black night was icy, bone-numbingly cold, just as the inside of the big black leather purse had been. Billy stood on the threshold, swaying, breathless, shaken by his jackhammer heart, and he was seized by the mad idea that his entire bungalow was now inside the crazy old woman's purse, which made no sense. The bottomless purse was back there in the kitchen, on the table. The purse could not be inside the house at the same time that the house was inside the purse, could it? He felt dizzy, confused, nauseous. He had always known everything worth knowing, or thought he did. Now he knew better. He didn't dare venture out of the bungalow into the unremitting blackness. He sensed no haven within that coaly gloom, and he knew instinctively that if he took one step into the frigid darkness, he would not be able to turn back. One step, and he would fall into the same terrible void that he had felt within the hag's purse, down and down, forever down. A hiss. The beast was behind him. Whimpering wordlessly, Billy Neeks turned from the horrifying emptiness beyond his house, looked back into the living room where the demon was waiting for him, and cried out when he saw that it had grown bigger than it had been a moment ago. Much bigger, 3 feet tall instead of 1, broader in the shoulders, more muscular arms, thicker legs, bigger hands, and longer claws. The repulsive creature was not as close as he had expected, not on top of him, but standing in the middle of the small living room, watching him with predatory interest, grinning, taunting him merely by choosing not to end the confrontation quickly. The disparity between the warm air in the house and the freezing air outside generated a draft that sucked the door shut behind Billy. It closed with a bang. Hissing, the demon took a step forward. When it moved, Billy could hear its gnarly skeleton and oozing flesh work one against the other like the parts of a grease-clogged machine in ill repair. He backed away from it, heading around the room toward the short hall that led to the bedroom. The repugnant apparition followed, casting a hellish shadow that was somehow even more grotesque than it should have been, as if it were thrown not by the monster's malformed body, but by its more hideously malformed soul. Perhaps aware that its shadow was wrong, perhaps unwilling to consider the meaning of its twisted silhouette, the beast purposely knocked over the floor lamp as it stalked Billy, and in the influx of shadows it proceeded more confidently and more eagerly, as if darkness greased its way. At the entrance to the hallway, Billy stopped edging sideways, bolted flat out for his bedroom, reached it, and slammed the door behind him. He twisted the latch with no illusions of having found sanctuary. The creature would smash through that flimsy barrier with no difficulty. Billy only hoped to reach the nightstand, where he kept a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum, and indeed he got it with time to spare. The gun was smaller than he remembered. He told himself that it seemed inadequate only because the enemy was so formidable. The weapon would prove plenty big enough when he squeezed the trigger, but it still seemed small, virtually a toy. With the loaded .357 held in both hands and aimed at the door, he wondered if he should fire through the barrier or wait until the beast burst inside. The demon resolved the issue by exploding through the locked door in a shower of splinters and mangled hinges. It was bigger still, more than 6 feet tall, bigger than Billy, a gigantic and loathsome creature that, more than ever, appeared to be constructed of filth, wads of mucus, tangled hair, fungus, and the bits and pieces of cadavers. Redolent of rotten eggs, with its multiplicitous white eyes now as radiant as incandescent bulbs, it lurched inexorably toward Billy, not even hesitating when he pulled the trigger of the .357 and pumped 6 rounds into it. Who or what had that old crone been, for God's sake? She was no ordinary senior citizen, living on Social Security, paying a visit to her butcher's shop, looking forward to bingo on Saturday night. Hell no, no way. What kind of crazy woman carried such a strange purse and kept such a thing as this at her command? What kind of witch? Of course, she was a witch. At last, backed into a corner, with the creature looming over him, the empty gun still clutched in his left hand, the scratches and bites burning in his right hand, Billy really knew for the first time what it meant to be a defenseless victim. When the hulking, unnameable entity put its massive, saber-clawed hands upon him, one on his shoulder, one on his chest, Billy peed in his pants and was at once reduced to the pitiable condition of a weak, helpless, and frightened child. He was sure that the demon was going to tear him apart, crack his spine, decapitate him, and suck the marrow out of his bones. But instead, it lowered its malformed face to his throat and put its gummy lips against his throbbing artery. For one wild moment, Billy thought it was kissing him. Then he felt its cold tongue lick his throat from collarbone to jawline, and he felt as if he'd been stung by 100 needles. Sudden and complete paralysis ensued. The creature lifted its head and studied his face. Its breath stank worse than the graveyard odor exuded by its repellent flesh. Unable to close his eyes, in the grip of a paralysis so complete that he could not even blink, Billy stared into the demon's maw and saw its moon-white, prickled tongue. The beast stepped back. Unsupported, Billy dropped limply to the floor. Though he strained, he could not move a single finger. Grabbing a handful of Billy's well-oiled hair, the beast began to drag him out of the bedroom. He could not resist. He could not even protest, because his voice was as frozen as the rest of him. He could see nothing but what moved past his fixed gaze, for he could neither turn his head nor roll his eyes. He had glimpses of furniture past which he was dragged, and he could see the walls and the ceiling above, over which shadows cavorted. When he rolled onto his stomach, he felt no pain in his cruelly twisted hair, and thereafter he could see only the floor in front of his face and the demon's clawed black feet as it trod heavily toward the kitchen where the chase had begun. Billy's vision blurred, cleared, blurred again, and he thought his failing sight was related to his paralysis. Then he understood that copious but unfelt tears were pouring from his eyes, streaming down his face. In all his mean and hateful life, he had no memory of having wept before. He knew what was going to happen to him. In his racing, fear-swollen heart, he knew. The stinking, oozing beast dragged him rudely through the dining room, banging him against the table and chairs. It took him into the kitchen, pulling him through spilled beer, over a carpet of scattered Doritos. The thing plucked the old woman's huge black purse from the table and put it on the floor within Billy's view. The unzippered mouth of the bag yawned wide. The demon was noticeably smaller now, at least in its legs and torso and head, although the arm with which it held fast to Billy remained enormous and powerful. With horror and amazement, but not with much surprise, Billy watched the creature crawl into the purse, shrinking as it went. Then it pulled him in after it. He didn't feel himself shrinking, but he must have grown smaller in order to fit through the mouth of the purse. Still paralyzed and still held by his hair, Billy looked back under his own arm and saw the kitchen light beyond the purse, saw his own hips balanced on the edge of the bag above him, tried to resist, saw his thighs coming in, then his knees. The bag was swallowing him. He could do nothing about it. The bag was swallowing him, and now only his feet were still outside, and he tried to dig his toes in, tried to resist, but could not. Billy Neeks had never believed in the existence of the soul, but now he knew that he possessed one, and that it had just been claimed. His feet were in the purse now. All of him was in the purse. Still looking back under his arm as he was dragged down by his hair, Billy stared desperately at the oval of light above and behind him. It was growing smaller, smaller, not because the zipper was being drawn shut up there, but because the hateful beast was dragging him a long way down into the bag, which made the open end appear to dwindle the same way that the mouth of a turnpike tunnel dwindled in the rearview mirror as one drove toward the other end. The other end. Billy could not bear to think about what might be waiting for him at the other end, at the infinitely deep bottom of the purse and beyond it. He wished that he could go mad. Madness would be a welcome escape from the dread that filled him. Madness would provide sweet relief. But evidently, part of his fate was that he should remain totally sane and acutely aware. The light above had shrunk to the size of a small, pale, oblate moon riding high in a night sky. It was like being born, Billy realized, except that this time he was being born out of light and into darkness. The moon form above shrank to the size of a small and distant star. The star winked out. In the perfect blackness, many strange voices hissed a welcome to Billy Neeks. That night, in late April, the bungalow was filled with distant, echoey screams of terror from so far away they did not reach the quiet street beyond the walls and did not draw any attention from nearby residents. The screams continued for a few hours, faded gradually, and were replaced by licking, gnawing, chewing sounds of satisfied consumption. Then silence. Silence held dominion for many hours, until the middle of the following afternoon, when the stillness was broken by the sound of an opening door and footsteps. "Ah," the old woman said happily, as she stepped through the kitchen door and saw her purse standing open on the floor. With arthritic slowness, she bent, picked up the bag, and stared into it for a moment. Smiling, she pulled the zipper shut. And there you have another fun Friday Night Frights story, this one by Dean Koontz. And I hope you'll join us next week for another fun story. And until then, have a great week, everyone.
Cannon.
Don't use a cannon to kill a mosquito.
Queens is full of mosquitoes.
Look at these mosquito bites.
Doctors, sunburn, mosquitoes.
I knew it. The camper's best friend, the mosquito.
This mosquito net's not working.
I live near a lake. I get mosquito bites all the time.
Mosquitoes in here. Did anybody spray the tent?
Mulder, what are they?
Mosquito bites.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I got eaten up a lot myself out there.
Here's Johnny.
Don't let the itch drive you mad. BH Stop Bite and Sting Relief is your go-to solution to soothe your itchy, painful mosquito bites, bee and wasp stings, poison oak or poison ivy, or anything that scratches at your sanity. Get yours today right here on the Hidden Corners.
I'll take it.